Hey everybody, it's Brian, and welcome back. So let me ask you something. What do these three pieces all have in common? Well, they all have what's known as a feature ring. And a feature ring is simply a ring that you add some form of embellishment to make it stand out. And it could be a stripe pattern, it could be a zigzag, it could be diamonds. It could simply be that the one ring is made from a contrasting wood so it stands out. And there are literally hundreds and hundreds, thousands really, of designs that you can come up with. And today we're going to talk about one of the simplest ones to do, and that's a zigzag pattern. So let's get started. Okay, so here's the layout of a segmented bowl. And if you guys are unfamiliar with how to do this, just refer to my other video set, which is building and designing a segmented bowl, and that'll get you caught up. So as you can see, I've got the shape laid out here. And while the shape is nothing special, it's just a simple bowl, this is the perfect canvas to add a feature ring to, and it'll really dress it up. Now, a feature ring is usually found at the widest part of a turning. Now, occasionally they are found elsewhere, especially in hollow forms or vases. You might see one at the rim of the neck and also maybe even down towards the foot. But for this bowl, we're going to stick in the standard spot, which is the widest location, which is right here, which is this segment. Now, to lay one of these out, that's the first thing you need to do is go ahead and block out your bowl. And by taking this measurement, we're going to draw out the design that we want. So let me show you how that's done. All right, so what I've done here is laid out the exact height and width of our segment. And referring back to our plan, our height was 3/4 and our width was 2.61 inches. Now, what you do is you take the width and divide that by 2, and you have a center line, and you draw that, of course, in the center. Now, here is where it's up to you to decide how much of an angle you want to have in your zigzag. And this is up to you. It does not matter. This is purely your preference. And in this particular shape, what I did was I measured down a 1/16 of an inch from the top and then allowed for a 3/16 strip, and I laid out some lines. So I'm just simply going to use an angle finder here, and I'm going to connect those lines. Okay, so now that our lines are drawn, what we need to do is figure out a materials list. And starting with our center piece, we already established that that is 3/16 of an inch. So now what we need to do is figure out how much material we need to add to either side of that to achieve this pattern. So if you use a little machinist ruler like this and using the lines that are on it, kind of like a T-square, you come up and you want to come to this corner. You don't want to come to the center of it. You want to come to the widest part away from the stripe, which is this corner. And looking at it, it is right at 1/2 of an inch. So if we add some 3/4 material to the top and the bottom, then that's going to give us plenty of material to clamp up and then later true up. And you know, if we lose any during the cutting process, it's not going to matter. We're still going to come in where we want to be. So that's what we're going to do. And the idea here is to essentially make a sandwich, a linear sandwich of 3/4, 3/16, and 3/4. Now, how do you figure out the length? Well, the segment here is actually comprised of 2 smaller segments. And what we need to do is figure out the length of one segment itself. So what we want to do is measure along the length of the stripe. You don't want to measure basically from line to line. That's not going to give you the right measurement. What you want to do is, again, go along this stripe line, and we're at 1 3/8 inches. Okay, now this part may seem a little confusing, but just bear with me and it'll come clear in a minute. But this segment is actually comprised of 2 smaller segments. So that 1 3/8 inches is for 1/2 of that. So this is a 12-sided bowl, but it's actually comprised, this particular ring is comprised of 24 segments. And so if we multiply 1 3/8 inches by 2, we come up with 2 3/4. okay? And if we take 2 3/4, multiply it by 12, we come up with a total of 33 inches. And of course, you could have just multiplied 1 3/8 by 24, and you would have arrived at the same number. Now, keep in mind, this is for a 12-sided bowl. So if you're doing an 18-side, 8-side, 15, 16, whatever the number is, you're going to have to multiply accordingly. So 33 is the exact length of sandwiched, pieces of wood here that would give us this pattern. But what we have to remember is we have to cut that sandwich down several times, and we're going to lose material every time we cut it. So we know that we're going to have to cut it at least 24 times to get each one of these segments. Okay, so our blade is 1/8 of an inch, and if we do that math, that tells us we're going to lose 3 inches of material just to make those cuts. Now, that is essentially to make this joint right here, to make the zigzag pattern. We also have to then angle either side of that. And it's a good idea to go ahead and count that as another kerf cut. So let's go ahead and say 24 more cuts will be another 3 inches that we have lost. So if you take all those numbers, that comes up to 39 inches. Now, we still need something to hang on to while we're cutting it. We have to be safe about this, of course. So, go ahead and let's just say, let's make a 48-inch piece to begin with, and that'll give us plenty of material to work with. One other quick thing I wanted to point out. At this stage, you may be looking at the design and say, well, the zigzag is not exactly the way I wanted it to look. Maybe you wanted it to be a steeper pattern. Well, you can do that, but you have to trade something in return. And what I mean by that is if we look at this segment, it's exactly 3/4 by 2.61, which is what our plan calls for. And if we want a little bit of wood showing at the top and the bottom of each one, this is pretty much the only design we could get out of it. We could go with a shallower zigzag that's not quite as steep as this, but if you want to go steeper, you have to trade something out. And what I mean is you could go with a 1-inch tall segment, and that would allow you to get a steeper pattern. The other thing you could do is add more segments. So this is a 12-sided bowl. But if you made just this ring, say 18 sides or even 24 sides, then it would be much steeper, but the pattern would be, I guess, it would repeat itself very quickly. You wouldn't have kind of a gentle zigzag pattern going all around it. It would be much steeper. Now, if that's what you're going for, then by all means, that's fine. But with this particular shape, this is pretty much the only pattern we can get.